To be a teacher in today's modern era really does call for that person to be giving in nature. In addition to possessing an understanding of others, having compassion, patience, and a desire to help guide others. I would imagine that the strain of this job year after year begins to wear on you as time goes on because you're exposed to so many different people that there's a certain level of vulnerability that naturally comes with the job of teaching. But even with the exposure that comes with that job, as a teacher, you would never imagine that you would leave for work one day and never return. It's October 22nd, 2013, and 24-year-old Colleen Ritzer leaves her home in Massachusetts and heads to work at Danvers High School. Colleen is bright, she's very much liked by her peers and colleagues, and she knew exactly what she wanted from life early on, and she was very much on her path to see it through. It had been a fairly normal day at school for Colleen, and she can be seen talking with one of her colleagues on CCTV footage dressed in identical clothing for Twin Day at the school. And at the end of the school day, all of the students and staff begin to filter out of the school, and a few of the students stay behind per usual. Now, some of those students have practice in their various sports, and others are staying after school to get extra tutoring and help from some of the teachers in their classes. Two of Colleen's students end up staying behind after class to get help. One student is a young female, and the other is a 14-year-old male student named Philip Chisholm. And Philip is known to many others in the school. He's an athlete and soccer player who, up until the events of this day, had been described as a typical boy for his age. He carried a calm demeanor. He was sociable with other students and teammates. There was really nothing in the way of his character or behavior that warranted a cause for concern. Yet on this particular day, unbeknownst to everyone else, Philip Chisholm was deeply disturbed, and he had arrived at school that day with a plan. So as the two students sat with Colleen and discussed various things, at one point, Colleen broached the topic of Tennessee, likely because she was aware that that was where Philip had moved away from before coming to Danvers High School. And I'm sure that this was a topic brought up by Colleen in a lighthearted attempt to maybe understand Philip's past a little bit more, or perhaps even get him to open up in the conversation that they were having. But according to the other female student that was present, this particular topic seemed to have the complete opposite effect. Philip began to close up, and he seemed as if he was visibly becoming frustrated or irritated with the topic of Tennessee. And what neither Colleen nor the female student knew was that this was a sore spot for Philip, because one of the reasons that he'd moved away from Tennessee was due to a very stressful divorce that his parents were going through. But again, there was no way that Colleen would have known this, or that she could have known this. According to that student, Philip's behavior at that point had completely changed. So at some point just before 3 p.m., Colleen decides to head off to the restroom. She's captured on camera walking out of the classroom, and she's also picked up on camera near the entrance of the restroom going inside. This footage was the very last time Colleen is seen alive. 1 minute later, Philip also makes an appearance on camera, but his movements are very shifty, to say the least. You see him walk out into the hallway from the classroom and look the other way, almost as if he's checking for something or someone. He goes back into the classroom and he walks right back out into the hallway again, but now he's raised the hood up over his head, and we see him proceed to follow Colleen's path to the bathroom. The creepiest and most disturbing thing about this footage is that he comes into view of the camera just on the outside of the bathroom entrance, and you can see him sliding on a pair of tan colored gloves. Now, he enters the bathroom right after Colleen and is inside as the minutes begin to tick by. 11 minutes later, right at this very moment, with Colleen and Philip in that bathroom, another female student enters into that very bathroom as well, but she's seen on camera exiting almost as quickly as she's entered. When that student was later identified and questioned about what she'd seen inside, she stated that the reason she turned around and walked out was because she saw another student inside of the bathroom, half dressed, with their back to her and a pile of clothes on the floor. So in her mind, she thought that she had just walked in on someone getting changed. So to say that she was a bit startled was to say the least. So she just walked right back out. And it's very unsettling to think about the fact that she was so very close to danger and had no clue whatsoever what had just taken place inside of that bathroom. This decision to leave, in all likelihood, saved her life. Now, this next part of the video is really unbelievable when you put it into the context of a typical school building with activities still taking place all over the school grounds. So Philip leaves the bathroom right after that student, and not even 10 minutes after leaving does he return with a large recycling garbage bin. You know the ones. I'm sure many of you have them in your backyard, or at the very least you've seen them parked on someone's curb waiting to be dumped. Philip has now changed clothes, and at 3:22 p.m. he's captured dragging that recycling bin through the hallways of the school to the outside of the school, down the sidewalk, where he passes an older gentleman and his dog, and proceeds to disappear off camera and presumably off school grounds and out of sight. At one point in that video, you can very clearly see that one of the gloves on his hand is completely soaked in a red substance. It's really mind-blowing watching this footage, because that older gentleman had no idea that what was inside of that barrel was not recyclable trash, but a body. And he just literally been a foot away from it. So this 14-year-old kid leaves the school premises and returns about a half hour later and changes clothes once again. And what does he do after that? Well, he continues to move around the school completely unchecked and unbothered. He's captured on camera several times, walking past various other staff, students, and at one point he even crosses paths with one of his teammates and makes small chit-chat before playfully kicking a soccer ball to that student in the hallway. He's also captured on the outside of the school, casually chit-chatting with other students as if he's just shooting the shit with absolutely nothing to worry about, not a care in the world. I've watched this footage several times over now, and I can't tell you how speechless I was sitting there watching this 14-year-old boy hold such poise and stillness, knowing what he'd just done to his math teacher not even an hour ago. It's disturbing and unbelievable to watch the cold-hearted nature of this kid on full display as he just went about moving in and out and around this school as he pleased. So anyway, time passes, right? And as it does, Philip's soccer coach gets a call from one of his senior players who informs him that Philip never showed up to practice, nor did he show up to the team meeting or dinner. And A missing report is made to the authorities because they now have a student that they believe is missing. He can't be found anywhere. At the same time, Colleen's parents are filing a missing report on her behalf because she too has gone missing. And as search parties moved out into the night searching for Philip, thinking that something had happened to him, they had no idea that a faculty member was also missing and that Philip was the reason behind it. And sometime shortly after midnight, Philip is spotted by an officer walking on the side of the highway. That officer conducts a search and finds a box cutter on him with blood on it. And it turns out that that box cutter was not the only item found. The officer also discovers Colleen's credit cards and a pair of her underwear during that search of his backpack. And when they question him about the items that they found, he tells them that he just found them on the ground. Then he changes his story at another point and says he stole them from inside of a car. But when they key in and ask him about the blood covering the box cutter and where it came from, he coldly replies, "The girl." With all of the evidence that they had and the knowledge of Colleen being reported missing, they began piecing together what had taken place and started a search hours later near the high school after Philip tells them that that is where they will find Colleen. And they would ultimately discover Colleen's body laying beneath some leaves. She was nude from the waist down, and her body had been positioned in what investigators described as a sexually suggestive pose, with a tree branch still stuck inside of her genital area. Nearby was a note that had written on it, "I hate you all." And after an autopsy was performed, all of the chilling details of what had happened to Colleen would come out in court. At trial, the defense team did what defense lawyers typically do, and they tried to say that Philip was a troubled kid with brain development issues and that he was not guilty by reason of insanity, blah, blah, blah. You know how they do. But all of that had to stand against the evidence. And that evidence was beyond damning. It was beyond horrid. It was brutal and demonic in nature. And it turns out that Colleen was strangled. She was stabbed 16 times in the neck. 3 of those stab wounds hit major blood arteries. And she also had her throat slit. And then she was sexually assaulted with that tree branch. The damage done to Colleen was so severe that there could not be a definitive cause of death from any one type of attack. In addition to the violent physical assault that Philip had committed, investigators were also able to track his cell phone to a local theater at one point during their search for him, showing that he casually went to catch a movie after murdering and sexually assaulting his teacher. There was no humanity left in that boy. He was simply wearing a human appearance, an outer shell and skin of how a human would appear and act. What could not be overlooked was the fact that this was a premeditated killing. He'd brought both the knife cutter and the ski mask to school that day. He had plans, sinister plans from the very beginning of that morning. And if you needed any further proof that Philip Chisholm was evil incarnate, walking around posing as a mild-mannered teenage boy while awaiting his trial, he ended up following a female youth service worker into a locker room where he reportedly choked and beat on her before he was eventually stopped by other workers. So following this, he faced 2 separate trials as a result, one for the attempted murder of that youth service worker and the other for the killing of Colleen Ritzer. Philip was convicted to 40 years for the killing and another concurrent 40 years for armed robbery due to the fact that he was a juvenile at the time of these crimes. So life sentences were off the table due to Massachusetts laws. However, the sexual assault charge was ultimately overlooked because the defense team convinced the jury that Colleen was already dead by the time he had assaulted her with that tree branch. Philip will ultimately be 50 years old by the time he is eligible to apply for parole, but I think it's abundantly clear that Philip Chisholm should never be allowed to see another moment of daylight among the Commonwealth ever again. Philip's mother would later release a statement of apology to the family of Colleen, but it's clear that Colleen Ritzer's family has suffered the most in the aftermath. The brutal manner in which her life was taken and body dumped into a trash bin before ultimately being left to die in the woods is the haunting memory that her friends and family are left with. May her soul and spirit continue to rest in peace.